Okay. Should be live on YouTube as well, Suku, if you want to give it a check. Share the link in here as well. Doing people. I'm thinking of maybe changing the time for this time slot, because we always have a very small audience. So I'm thinking this is probably middle of the night for a lot of people, but I'll think about that another time. Oh yeah, I saw you reply that earlier, Sukumo. No, I just meant that, like, when you shared the event, it didn't load right. A couple other things like that have been happening in Discord. Cool. And there's the YouTube stream. Awesome. Alright, so I have exactly an hour today. I have to go at the top of the hour. So we're gonna start with news. Charts are looking kind of interesting in that we're having a bit of a drawdown for the day at the moment. So hopefully we'll get time. We'll try and go through our news somewhat quick. Some things are sort of pushing a new low for the day compared to earlier here, whereas other things, like this thick orange line, is Ethereum. It's still up off its daily lows. So we'll take a look at all this in a bit, but let's see. This would have been last week, correct? This would have been 2 weeks ago. Let's see. This Wednesday. Actually, Sukumu, you wouldn't happen to know. Is there a more updated version of this somewhere? This has happened a couple times before where I guess maybe people edit in their own documents, and then on this day, I know Wednesday once before was like, oh shoot, let me update it. I guess it didn't. Maybe we don't have anything for right now. I can go look at a couple headlines though, just see what's new in the news. Right. Okay, then maybe we will actually jump right to charts. Are there any news stories in particular that you guys have heard that you want us to take a look at? Or what's been interesting on your timelines this week? Just scanning headlines. Let me do very quick. Not sure. Actually, you know what I haven't done in like a week or so is taking a look at normal markets. Like at all, actually. It's been a week or two. So I'm gonna quickly dive into wherever. Because everything is correlated to some extent, right? Like the long-term hope is that Bitcoin disconnects from the stock market and they move almost opposite, but everything is related to each other, right? Like gold is sort of the example of what people want Bitcoin to become, the example that exists right now. But gold is correlated with most major markets. It might be inverse correlation sometimes. Other times it might be parallel correlation. But everything's related, so it is a good idea to keep an eye on all things, even if you only really deal in Web3 markets. And what I just meant by that too, just for like non-native English speakers, is sometimes gold might pump when stock markets are going down, as like, you know, a hedge, depending on why they're going down. That's what we eventually want to see more of from Bitcoin. We've been seeing a bit of it. That's still a correlation, right? It's an inverse correlation, but they're still related. It's not, correlation doesn't only mean moving together. I feel like my cat wants to say hi. Goober. Yeah, he scared us the other day. I thought he was just about to like die. Literally. Just, I was in my room chilling. Luckily I had on these headphones, which are open back, so I can like hear anything that's happening. These earbuds, I can't hear shit. Suddenly we just heard him like make a noise we've never heard before, just like a wailing moan. And I don't even, it was weird. And he just kind of like fell over and started like crying like death sounds. And then 5 minutes later it was good. So I'm not sure what was up with that, but we're getting him checked out soon. So fingers crossed. Okay, so traditional markets are pretty much like recovered and battling with prior ATH levels. Makes sense given what we've been seeing in crypto. That's kind of what I assumed had been going on. But let's go to a real chart actually. Let's do, I've never used Yahoo's advanced chart. How do I switch you to candle? Probably a button, right? Alright, we'll go without candles. Oh, here we go. Boom. Oh, interesting. Mountain, they called that. Okay. Alright, never mind. Not gonna learn any platform here today. Alright, let's start with Ethereum, I guess. We'll pull up SPX, but I just kind of wanted to see generally where it's at. So, Ethereum, kind of still just right in the center of its range, really. You could argue on the... I'd probably say on the bullish side of its range, in that we've seen more price action and time spent in this sort of range than in the top half of this range. So this is the range we're consolidating in, right? This whole thing, sort of our bull flag. But hey, how's it going, Wednesday? Just sent you a message. Oh, cool. Yeah, let me check cool. Gotcha. No worries, Wednesday. I just tagged everyone, thinking maybe someone else had put something together somewhere, but just forgotten to put it in the sheet. That's alright. No worries. No worries. Suki, you can check in the VD chat as well if you want to see what Wednesday said. I hope all is going to be well Wednesday. Sounds potentially scary, or at least an annoying time to go through. So you take as much time as you need. Do what you got to do, my friend. But anyways, So within this sort of larger box that I've drawn, you can see it's sort of split into two, fairly even, actually exactly even. I literally duplicated the rectangle. And we've spent the majority of our kind of time and volume in the lower half of it. So the fact that we're now sort of sitting in the upper half, starting to print hopefully another green daily candle, could be our first step on really breaking out of this bull flag. I'm a little thrown off today because I had a plan. I was going to go through. I didn't even plan to look at charts today, so how do I want to go into a lower time frame? It potentially you could argue something like this is valid for sure, this trend line. Let's go ahead and see when that would. You hardly ever follow a trend line till the very end, but assuming that that works as a sort of bullish support going forward, our next big leg up would come no later than, doesn't even go out that far. Let's say end of June. I don't think realistically it would take longer than around here. So what are we looking for at the moment? Honestly, this line in between these two rectangles I drew actually seems like a pretty important support and resistance level. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in something for that. This thicker, this as well. And I'm going to get rid of these just because they're ugly. So today, you know, looking at this, and the other thing actually we want to pair this with, so to speak. Actually, let's overlay them. Let's overlay them. So we're going to do BTC. So in some capacities, this other chart that I just added, like I was saying in one of the chat channels earlier today here in Discord, potentially more important, at least for confirmations and breakouts, than the USD chart at the moment. So we're in a sort of phase of crypto where, in general, things are still moving together. Bitcoin might lie kind of flat while stuff's pumping, or Bitcoin might lie kind of flat while stuff is dumping. We've seen that a couple times on the smaller time frames, just in recent weeks even. But we're not really seeing anything like certain coins are absolutely pumping while others are dumping. For the most part, things are moving together. And so kind of translating that to this chart here, this is our ETH BTC chart. So ETH priced against Bitcoin, not the US dollar. And you can kind of see, like, here's probably the best example of why. Actually, no specific thing. I don't know why I started that sentence that way. But a great example of how comparing these charts can kind of give you some insight into the market. So right here, when we saw this nice rise from ETH, we can almost tell like that wasn't bullishness in Ethereum at all. That it basically stayed the same price as BTC and just followed its pump. So BTC probably led this pump, the rest of the market kind of followed. And then I'm sure, as we looked at in a prior week, if we were to zoom out a bit here, and draw some like trend lines down here. In fact, you can just see what a sharp drop we had, and then a relatively flat bottom, sort of an odd looking bottom to be honest. But then we started to see price movement that was powered by Ethereum itself, an altcoin. So here we saw Ethereum rise quite a bit without Bitcoin following. We'll We'll add Bitcoin in for a second. Actually, here. So Bitcoin did rise, but not nearly as much as Ethereum. Whereas here, Bitcoin rose about as much as Ethereum. Mainly just things like arbitrage and market makers keeping these various pairs in check. That's one of the reasons markets move together. If someone makes a ginormous, huge purchase on the BTC USD pair, then suddenly there's arbitrage opportunities to be made, not just on other BTC USD pairs, but also on kind of everything else that Bitcoin's paired against, especially things with the largest amounts of liquidity, like Ethereum. So, Timmy, you gonna open a long for ETH? Not a bad idea. Yeah, let's take a look at that actually. Let's see. I think in general, around this area is probably a good move. The one thing that's worrying me is these 3 peaks. Potentially a 3 dives pattern. Which I guess, so let's draw some stuff for that. So I don't want to use the actual built-in one. Let's see, what kind of levels do we want to share? So obviously this level I've drawn at about, of course. Uh, 2588, 2,588. Is where I'd say there's a sort of perfectly flat. We've seen a couple tops there before. We've seen a couple bottoms with support, I think. I've not seen that before. Waiting for 2600, maybe a little under it. 4-hour chart is still not bearish to me. Let's check out the 4. I think this is the one where nope. Yep. Still fairly healthy looking. This is a somewhat large rejection, but daily's looking interesting. But we have a lot of time left in the day. If the daily were to close like this, I would say potentially bearish. We have a lot of time left before the actual body of this candle closes. Let's bring back some of these real quick. Let's see what might indicate a particularly good place to enter here if you're looking for an ETH long. Actually, so Bitcoin is at a pretty bouncy spot. So even if you're looking to trade a different token like ETH, part of why I've been talking about correlation and stuff is this matters. If Bitcoin catches support here and bounce, the rest of the market will too, even if it's not it being whatever coin you're looking at, in this case Ethereum, even if it's not on a trend line as perfectly as Bitcoin, or it doesn't have RSIs or moving averages crossing just right. Bitcoin sort of is the most important, and its TA is the most important, simply by virtue of the most money being involved in it, right? No, it's not tea time, but I couldn't help myself. So yeah, I guess we'd be looking for, we can actually keep an eye on this chart that's at the top of the chat here, this aggregated Bitcoin thing. We'd be looking for a pretty big wave of Bitcoin buys to come in around here. Other than that, so let's see, we've got, let's see what we can put in here. We've got a lower trend line actually that could be what Bitcoin's heading towards. The one I drew was pretty small. It was in from here, like down in this tiny zone. There's this larger one that, large is usually more confirmed, more money has bounced off each of the points. So we could, and just based on general market that I'm seeing above, and on a couple other things, I think we might keep dropping here. For a little bit here, nothing like super bearish. And then what we're really looking for, what you want to make sure is that this red chart doesn't start looking bearish. As long as this starts looking good, you can be somewhat confident in continuing to hold an ETH long, because any downside that it sees will probably just be a result of Bitcoin's weakness. And this is looking quite strong, in my opinion. I mean, we have... Actually, we can see a breakout soon. Just like, this could reverse at any moment and just sort of be the draw, where Bitcoin could even stay flat. Let's zoom into ETH for a second here. I would maybe, if you don't have any positions, I would maybe add a little here, Suku. Don't do your whole amount, but like, this is a pretty sharp drop we just saw. We are near a general just swing low. Yeah, I'm good spot. Not financial advice. But let's see. So, okay, so with your new position, like, I'm just gonna be using you as the example today, Suku. I didn't have anything in particular planned. I was planning to go off news stuff, so this works perfectly. So let's start with where you should probably put a stop. Okay. Excuse it. So quickly. So first question, do you plan to add to your long? How much, what's going on? That broke lock? Yes, sir. How's it going, man? My lick price, 234. Wait, okay, so what kind of trading are you doing? Are you trading with a small amount of money, high leverage? Oh, wait, sorry. 23 is pretty far away. Okay. Small, yes, 10x. 10x is not that small. The average person can't even use 10x. You have margin to add. Okay, so wait. Let me ask a couple things. When you say margin to add, do you mean you have funds off platform that you can bring in and lower your liquidation price? Or do you mean that of the funds already on there, you might buy more ETH by upping your leverage? I'm not super, I should clarify, I don't know exactly how your platform's margin system works. So I just mean, like, do you plan to add Ethereum to that long without upping the leverage multiplier? Or only if you have to keep the position alive? Because to be honest, you bought at a pretty good spot in terms of, I would throw your first stop loss just right below local bottom, where we just were. If we don't do a decent reversal here, then we'll probably go a bit lower. Look how close we are to this prior local bottom. You know, if we were to retrace and go below, I don't know exactly what your platform looks like. Aren't you on Gate? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, there's lots of different strategies, right? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in with very low leverage, assuming it's probably not the bottom, and assuming I'm just going to DCA more as it drops. Other times I'll kind of go in with my full load, like what I might have done right here, but put a pretty tight stop loss, thinking, okay, if it blows through this, I want to be completely out so I can go all in again a little bit later. Yeah, if I were you, Suku, set a stop on that position you just opened for, like, 26.4. 26.4 exactly. Or 26.04. 2,604. Unless, like I was just saying, unless your alternative strategy would be if it drops below that, you might want to plan when to add more. But, by the way, today I had a meeting with a guy who builds a perp dex with a 10,000x leverage opportunity. Sounds like a phenomenal way to scam people without actually scamming them because they're agreeing to it. That's crazy. That's wild. That's insane. The highest I've ever seen is like 500x. And even then, that's for trading like fiat pairings and like Forex, not for what like crypto. Okay, so I'll let you decide what you want to do on the downside, whether you want to add to that position, stop out. But I do think just below our local low is probably a good marking point. Another would be here. I think if we drop below 2588 into the lower half of this range that we've lived in for the past week or so. I actually really don't want to see that. That could be bad. I think if we drop below this line, it puts us in a sticky spot with this trend line. Because once we're below here, we have only this little room to work. We'll tackle that if we get to it. Even if it takes a tea time stream. For now, though, am bullish. In fact, I'm also liking what I'm seeing in the RSI down here. Oh, I didn't even notice. Wow, you guys can't even see it. Look at this crazy fucking... let me get this better real quick. Okay. Okay, so... there's a bunch of different ways to use RSIs. Also, as you've noticed, I've been changing my time settings here, and this has just been staying, so this isn't even necessarily, like, set right. You know, if I wanted to trade based off of this, I would play around with settings a lot more, see what lines up with some of these actual inflection points, although it doesn't seem too bad right now, actually. These settings are pretty decent. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, these settings are good. And why I'm liking what I'm seeing, funny enough, is... so here, getting above the 70 level on RSI, anytime we go above this dashed line is what I'm going to be looking at. Could have been a good time to close out of your position or reduce or short. We did pull back from that. We did kind of keep running, but again, above this dashed line could have been a good time to short. You would have had the opportunity to get in as low as back here, or let's say I would have bought here because of this slope. Here, again, we barely get out of the dash line, but we do, and it was, in fact, a perfect little peak. Would have been a good time to sell. Here, as well, we get out of the dash line. This is why I was surprised these settings work so well, because this one doesn't quite get up over, which is... anyways, so all looking good until... in terms of, like, you could trade based off this RSI. Till we get here. So we see this big ol' spike. And then we do not see a big retracement after it. In fact, we see another high soon after with a much lower RSI peak. And in general, this just whole part of it right here, this section, I would say, it's kind of nice that we're seeing a downward trend, while technically our price, though it's kind of choppy and all over the place, is upward. So this is sort of a reset, so to speak. Like you cannot have the reason you use oscillating indicators, this type, RSIs and many others, is because markets go up and down. But generally, they go in one direction if you zoom out enough, right? And it's usually up and to the right. Um, and so these things can't stay high forever. These buy signs, right? If you were to zoom out, actually, I'm not gonna get. I was about to get sucked into a whole little talk on the philosophy of why indicators work the way they do, but I'm not equipped for that conversation. But in essence, if we want to see continued price rising, it's not really ever going to happen after we see a big spike. Here, you could kind of argue like oh, we definitely kept rising, but this was our huge breakout. This is something we'll see like once every couple months in a bull cycle, and it pushed the RSI to these new limits. It actually did show like, no, 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 I can go higher, look. But this is actually a good example right here. The fact that we were able to get back above this peak, the RSI first had to cool off and reset with this drawdown, right? At least a little bit, so that it had room to go up again. So I like seeing this sort of pull back because it sets us up for another nice big spike that could be the one that fully brings us out of this range. Let's see. I think that level people saw one beats just $10 in margin break. Yeah, that's absurd. Gambling for real. So here, the only way that could ever work. The only way any kind of leverage that high can ever work, like when I used to use 100x leverage platforms like BitMEX and stuff, you basically ignored the fact that there even was leverage above like 30x, 40x until you were up like a couple 1000%. So what I mean by that is like if the way I used to trade on BitMEX, and this is I lost a lot of money this way. I wouldn't recommend doing it, but it's the only way that it even somewhat makes sense to use leverage as high as 100k, let alone 10,000. Would be, let's say you get lucky with a pretty good entry here. You do it at like 40x leverage, right? It's fairly high. And then by the time you get up here, maybe down in here, you're doing really a lot of TA, you're on fire. You can add to it and up it to like 60x, 70x leverage. And then only once that same position was up here would I dare to maybe max out that slider to 100, because it was the only way you could get a position to utilizing 100x leverage without your liquidation being 0.5% below the current price, is if you averaged in your entry so that even though you were technically at 100x, you slowly scaled into it such that your average entry price would have been like here or something, you know, whatever it would be. Okay, let's move over and take a look at Bitcoin. So similar, interesting. God, this is my chaos chart. It's also so funny to see how the lines get so much thinner above 100k, because I drew these all back when 100k was so long ago. I wasn't plotting any lines that high. These thick white ones we're looking at here are new. All right, so Bitcoin, I think here roughly is where I was drawing this trend line earlier. I think that's still a very valid. Spend some time getting that a little bit more exact, but not too important. So right about here, where was this? So Monday. This I don't have a name for it. It's not something I've learned about. It's something that's in my own mind. But I guess I would consider it like an inflection point. I really like to see when fib lines or horizontal support resistance points, you know, if they're drawn some other way, cross with an upwards trend line, or if I'm shorting downwards, but I don't do too much shorting. So I think there was another I saw potentially. No, I also just realized. Listen and digest myself. Yes, yes, please throw me a like on YouTube, throw me a sub. You can keep it open in the background if you want. Basically, not to overcomplicate it, but now we sort of have two different pieces of hand-drawn TA acting as support below us. So if we were to drop, first we would have to get through this sort of trend line. And then second, actually, I don't know how much I care or have faith in this fib line. Where did this come from? I actually don't know what that, I don't know if I care about that line or believe it. Oh, we can look at one of our past weeks. So I assume we would have drawn this like down here, since that's where our line is starting. We got the first part of it right, but then we did proceed to break down. So let's clean up some of this. I don't think any of these are relevant anymore. I am going to keep this one. There's a lot of different ways you could draw this trend line, and that means a lot of different people probably have drawn it differently. So don't stress too much. Different people will have slightly different versions of something like this, where, you know, where is it actually perfectly lining up with things? You could probably shift that around, and they'd all be valid. Okay, so that's where those fibs are coming from. Cool. I do like those. I'm gonna leave those. God, what a crazy chart, in all honesty. Like, just, I don't think people appreciate this fucking asset enough. Interesting that we're kind of expanding wedges we rise. I don't love that. Do not love that, really. All right, let's add in some smaller term fibs from recent price action. Since we closed a couple different dailies here, and, or not closed, but yeah, two. Actually gonna do from that level. And where do we want to go down to is the question. Do we want to go true bottom? Handle bottom. See what seems to fit best. First of all, let's change this. Interesting. This puts us like on a fib. Wait, no. But what is... No, never mind. I'm not seeing any that I love. What's up, Belly? Well, I hope you feel better, my friend. Hey, before you leave, got a coin you want me to look at? Feel free to shout one out. Do it real quick. Just for you. You know, I hate to say it, but it would make sense to kind of do something like this again. That's what we're starting. How can I describe what my brain is thinking right now? Definitely on a smaller scale, though. Something like this would kind of make sense to me. Also, weird that it just happens to correlate with this trend line that we drew. This would actually be very believable price action. Bounce off there, below, rejection, fight around, and then eventually break through. I think there's also a good possibility that Bitcoin just rips up a bit higher before doing something like this. Don't get me wrong, but this wouldn't like. Something like this. Obviously, this is already impossible. You can see we're off track, but just a general sort of, some sort of, this choppiness becoming the start of some sort of formation, right? Or at least consolidation. Could even be something more like this. No, that doesn't fit what I'm thinking. 100k zone is super important. Yeah, if it drops there, I'm gonna try long, but with stop loss. If we drop down to the 100k area, hard. We'd have to see when we get there. We'd have to look at. We'd have to see. Usually, I don't set a stop loss. Do you let yourself just get liquidated, or do you manually stop yourself out? I'll take a look at Bera. People are always asking me to, and even if they're not in the stream right now, they will be able to watch this on YouTube later, so. Oh, couldn't even hold the fib level, okay. I think technical analysis can be a trap in Web3, especially for any project that's new or especially innovative. I'm not like bearish on Berachain as a project. I just like price wise for the token, it's hard to even do technical analysis because so much of its price action is not technical. Think of like, oh sorry, Timmy, because sometimes they sweep the support level and trigger liquidations. They sure do, but they also, yeah, they do that to liquidate people. So if you don't set stop losses, they'll potentially get you with a liquidation eventually. But I do similar. So actually, here's my philosophy. Because I actually agree with what you just said, Tsukumo. I know exactly where your mindset is at. Like, there's literally stop hunting in Web3, where there will be a temporary short drawdown in price just to liquidate, or just to wipe out stops and liquidate over leveraged positions. That is definitely a thing. So the way I try and counter it, because I do use stops, actually. So I'll circle back to when I use stops. I always use stops for one thing. Is if you're not going to be trading with a stop because of those things, just trade on the cautious side until you're up a good bit on an existing position by DCAing. So oh, I just had an example. My brain just went. What was I gonna say? If you're gonna trade without stops, basically, I had some perfect example. If you're gonna trade without stops, trade extra conservatively. Trade with even lower leverage than you normally would. Feel free to up that leverage once you're in profit on a position, if you want to add to an existing green position. But yeah, I guess it wasn't too insightful. Be careful, it boils down to. But instead, if the price gets too close to my liquidation level or there's a risk of it approaching, I prefer adding more margin. Yep, if you're able to do that, yep, totally. However, sometimes it's not worth doing this and accepting that the trade idea is unsuccessful. Yeah, that's more so. Actually, I'm really glad you said that, Andre. That's more so what I think stop losses are good for. Is levels that you can confidently say, like, okay, if we lose this level, then we might be in like bear market, or at least a temporary month or two long bear. There are certain levels or trend lines or whatever you can see where it's like, this one won't just be a stop hunt, right? So let's try and just go back to BTC real quick. See if we can grab an example. Okay, so a lot of people probably have stop loss. Weird. Just changed my chart on me. A lot of people probably have stop losses like here or right under it. A lot probably have some here or right under it. There are probably people with various stops based on fib levels around this range, right? And those are all things that I think do apply to what you're talking about, Tsukumo, where you're going with a trading style that's trying to avoid those deliberate stop hunts, like this one right here. People, yeah, perfect example right here, actually. A lot of people probably had stops at this level. And then this wick right here took them out real quick, even though they could have closed their position as high as like there before. Who knows what it's going to do the next couple candles. But if we zoom out a little bit here, we can say like, okay, this level, maybe more so, remember where it comes from if we zoom out. would say something like either here or here, depending on how what leverage you were playing with, and you know how much of a loss you're willing to take. But one of these three levels, either here, here, or here, I would probably set as like my... I will actually put a stop there, just because it's so far away that if we're to go there overnight while I'm asleep when you most need a stop or away from my computer, it's probably a bad sign that we're going to have at least a couple weeks of corrective downward moves, and I can get in at a much lower level. I cannot be stressing about an underwater position for days on end. And then the last thing to always keep in mind is literally just you will trade better when you're not under pressure and stressed and looking at a red position. So adding collateral, adding margin to keep a position alive, I do that a lot too. I keep stuff in the red, absolutely. But it does affect your psyche a little bit. You'll be a little bit extra stressed. You'll be really wanting to maybe add to that on dips when you shouldn't because you can't afford to up your leverage. You'll be wanting to see it turn green sooner than possible. And you can avoid a lot of that by... Whoa. My stream still good? Warning, the stream's current bit rate. Okay, weird. Yeah, never underestimate how much your own mental state affects trading and how you need to be comfortable and not panicking and not stressing about positions that are underwater. And like if you're heading to... I'm saying this from personal experience, all right? I used to be very bad at balancing this stuff. And there was a lot of nights where I would go to bed scared to fall asleep because I would be like staring at my phone in bed, like leaning over just staring at the charts because I was worried about maintaining a position, right? And thinking like, ooh, do I need to reduce this position a little or bring in some margin from one of my other wallets or something? If you're even having that thought, you are not trading responsibly. You should be able to go to bed or step away from your computer, go out, go for a hike, see friends, whatever it is, where you're away from charts and away from your trading terminal for at least 6-12 hours at a time, with at least saying like, okay, if all does go wrong, I have that emergency super deep stop loss, or my leverage is low enough that I literally don't care. Nothing could happen within 12 hours that would throw off my strategy too much. Yeah, there's a lot I've learned from just doing stuff wrong. And God, not just that. And then the next day, so it was in college, and I was using BitMEX and all sorts of shit. Just staying up all night, looking at charts. And then you're tired as fuck the next day too, and you're making poor decisions about trading, and it's just a vicious cycle, right? And then you're stressed, and you're not thinking through things as clearly. So lower leverage compounds very quickly. Like you could trade with 2x leverage, and as long as you were okay with, or as long as you were good with having like a couple small wins a day, that would start compounding pretty fast. And chances are you'd make a lot more money than the guy who's playing around with 20x leverage, because he's probably going to lose most of it. Just like by human nature and psychology, right? So I do have to leave very soon. I have to leave in like a couple minutes here. I have a call to hop on. Only 3 people in the audience right now. I'm wondering about changing the time slot for this one. I feel like time slot 2, as it's called here, is usually a very small audience. Yeah, that's the biggest attitude, Suku. Yep. Is like going in initially with a reasonable amount that either you can back up with more margin or that you wouldn't mind losing. Like sometimes I will play with 50x leverage and no stop losses. Totally. It'll be with like $10, $20 at a time, right? Where it's actually just like kind of gambling and fun, and it's like I could do this on bust a bit, you know. that's different than trading. And it doesn't create the same psychological stress because it's only $10 or $20. So usually it actually works pretty well because it's not like a lot of money, and you're thinking a lot clearer. Looking at our little chaos chart here before we go, hard to explain why in a quick second, but this looks like a pretty good bottom. I think you entered a good spot today, Suku. As for where you might want to look to close it, I would not. I think there's a chance that the next time ETH starts running, it really starts running, and it's a much longer term move. Where I don't think you'll want to start. Hopefully, soon we're going to get to the point where you won't even start thinking about when to take profit on ETH positions for weeks at a time, rather than days or hours. We have quite a few levels to overtake to get back where we were. And we're not going to do it in like 3 moves of this size, right? So I hope nobody's expecting that, because look how quickly ETH would be back at ATH if we just did this again. Right? So don't get too foolishly bullish. This is almost certainly nothing like this is going to happen. It just doesn't. Too many people would make money. That's not how money works. That's not how markets work. But once we clear this level with some gusto, I think we are on a general upwards into the right trend that Ethereum has been missing since actually only 2024? No, wait, no. Map point here. There we go. Yeah. That's much better. Alright, yeah, always fun, Suku. Yeah, I'm gonna think about rescheduling this one. We'll see. I don't know if today was just a little quiet. I feel like the Discord's been quiet in general, but this time slot has never been great, so might shift it. Tomorrow, we'll catch you guys at tea time. I don't know if I'll stream on YouTube. I'm always gonna stream Market Mania on YouTube. Not necessarily always tea time. Doesn't like the copyright stuff that I do on tea time sometimes, but we'll see you guys tomorrow for some drumming, some watching, some degeneracy, and some fun. Trade safe, Suku. Trade safe, Cuz, Andre. Anyone who watches this later on the YouTubes. Appreciate your sub, like. I gotta start remembering to say that kind of stuff. And make sure if you somehow are watching this on YouTube and are not already in the Discord right here, you join in and join the fam. Come join our convos. We have chats every day. And for the people in here listening, Cuss, Andre, Cuz, could be either. Make sure you guys check out the daily prompt and trade talk channels and such. Make sure you weigh in there. Just as a little tip from me to you about what some people are going to be looking for in the future. Have a good one, everybody. Oh, bye-oh.